You want a deal? Scarlett Vaughn's voice cut clean across the glass-walled boardroom, sharp enough to silence a dozen executives mid-breath. Then be useful, be my boyfriend. A ripple of restrained laughter followed, soft, polite, and cruel in the way only expensive rooms could afford to be. The man she pointed to didn't look like he belonged there. Ethan Cole stood near the far end of the table, sleeves rolled, a faint crease in his shirt that no tailor had ever touched, his presence quiet enough to be overlooked until now. Just temporary, Scarlett added, her tone smooth, transactional, already moving on as if the decision had been made before the words were spoken. Public appearances, dinners, one charity gala. I need stability. You need money. A few heads nodded. A few smirked. Someone whispered, he'll take it. The city beyond the glass shimmered under late afternoon sun, reflections bending across polished marble floors, the hum of air conditioning filling the spaces where dignity was supposed to live. Ethan didn't answer right away. He didn't shift, didn't defend himself, didn't even look embarrassed. He just watched her. Not the way men usually watch Scarlett Vaughn, with admiration or ambition, but with a calm that didn't belong in rooms like this. You're serious? He asked, voice low, steady, almost curious. Scarlett met his gaze, chin slightly raised, power sitting comfortably on her shoulders. Completely. It's simple. You play the role, you follow my rules, and you walk away better than you came in. A pause. Then another soft laugh from the far end of the table. 3 quick voices broke through, overlapping. It's easy money. Just say yes. Don't overthink it. The moment tightened, then slowed. Ethan's eyes moved across the room once, taking in tailored suits, expensive watches, polished confidence built on assumptions. The kind of room where people decided who mattered in under 3 seconds. He exhaled quietly. The light caught the edge of his jaw, the faint silver in his hair, the stillness that didn't ask for permission. I'll do it, he said. A few satisfied smiles appeared instantly, like a script unfolding exactly as expected. Scarlett gave a small nod, already reaching for her tablet, already moving on. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, but I have one condition. That stopped her. Not the words but the tone. She looked up again, slower this time, studying him instead of dismissing him. You don't get conditions, she said, not harshly, just factually. Ethan's lips curved, not into arrogance, not into defiance, but into something quieter. A knowing. Then I guess we don't have a deal. Silence fell, thin at first, then heavier, pressing against the glass, against the table, against every assumption in the room. No one laughed this time. Scarlett leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing, not in anger but in interest. What condition? She asked. The air shifted. Something subtle. Something no one could quite name yet. Ethan met her gaze, unhurried. If I decide to change the rules, he said, you don't question it. You trust me. 2 executives exchanged glances. Someone frowned. The city outside kept moving, cars flowing like nothing had changed. But inside that room something had. Scarlett held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then she smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with the faint edge of someone who believed she still controlled the board. Fine, she said. But don't mistake this for power. Ethan didn't answer. He just nodded once. And somewhere beneath the polished surface of that perfect room, the rules had already begun to shift. If you're enjoying this story, take a second to subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now let's go on. The agreement was signed in under 3 minutes, but the silence that followed lingered far longer than ink on paper ever should. Scarlett Vaughn did not believe in hesitation, not in business, not in people, and certainly not in a man like Ethan Cole. To her, he was a solution, nothing more. A temporary answer to a problem that required control, precision, and just enough illusion to satisfy a world that watched her every move. Yet as she slid the tablet across the table and he signed without reading twice, something about the way he did it unsettled her. No urgency, no gratitude, no flicker of desperation. Just a calm, deliberate motion, like a man who had already calculated the outcome long before the first word was spoken. You will have a schedule by tonight, she said, standing, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Each step measured, controlled, final. Public appearances start this weekend. You will need a suit. A faint pause followed, almost unnoticeable but present. Ethan glanced down at his worn sleeves, then back at her. "I will manage," he replied simply. 3 quick voices chimed again from the edge of the room, quieter this time, less certain. "He does not even own one. This will be interesting. He will embarrass her." Scarlett did not respond to them. She was already walking away, already moving toward the next decision, the next negotiation, the next piece of control. That was her rhythm. But behind her, something did not follow the script. Ethan did not rush to catch up. He did not ask questions. He did not thank her. He simply gathered his things and left the room as quietly as he had entered, as if the entire exchange had cost him nothing. Outside, the city air carried a different weight. The hum of traffic, the distant echo of sirens, the rhythm of life that did not care about billion-dollar deals or carefully constructed appearances. Ethan stepped onto the sidewalk and paused, just for a moment, his gaze drifting upward toward the glass tower that now reflected him back in fragmented pieces. Somewhere above, Scarlett Vaughn was already rewriting the narrative in her favor. Somewhere below, people like him were expected to play their roles without question. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded photo, edges worn from time, a young girl smiling back at him with the kind of joy that did not depend on status or approval. "Just a little longer," he murmured, almost to himself, before slipping it back into place. The next morning arrived with sharp sunlight cutting through the city like a promise no one had agreed to keep. Scarlett's office sat high above it all, a space designed to command respect without ever asking for it. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, controlled light, everything exactly where it needed to be. She stood near the glass, reviewing her reflection not out of vanity, but out of discipline. Every detail mattered. Every impression shaped outcomes. A soft knock broke the stillness. "He is here," her assistant said. Scarlett did not turn immediately. She allowed the moment to stretch, just enough to reestablish control before the next move. "Send him in." The door opened quietly, and Ethan stepped inside. For the first time, he was not invisible. Not because of what he wore, which was still simple, still unremarkable, but because of how he carried himself in a room that was designed to diminish men like him. He stopped a few feet from her desk, not too close, not too far, the distance calculated without effort. "You are late," she said, finally turning to face him. Ethan checked his watch once, then looked back up. "By your clock, maybe." A beat passed. Then another. The air shifted again. Subtle but undeniable. Scarlett studied him, not with dismissal this time, but with something sharper, something more precise. "You will learn quickly," she said, her voice calm, controlled. Ethan nodded slightly. "So will you." And for the first time since the deal had been made, Scarlett Vaughn did not immediately have the last word. The rules arrived that afternoon, not as suggestions, not as conversation, but as a document so precise it felt more like a contract with gravity than a simple arrangement between two people. Scarlett Vaughn did not leave room for interpretation. Every appearance was mapped, every interaction outlined, every word expected to serve a purpose. The schedule alone stretched across 3 pages, filled with charity galas, investor dinners, press interviews, and private meetings where perception mattered more than truth. Ethan read it once, slowly, his eyes moving line by line without reaction, without interruption. "You will memorize this," Scarlett said from behind her desk, her voice carrying that same controlled edge, the kind that expected obedience without resistance. "There are no improvisations. You follow the structure, you follow my lead, and you do not speak unless necessary." 3 quick sounds filled the room, subtle but sharp. Pen. Tapping. A chair shifting. A quiet exhale from her assistant standing near the door. The rhythm of control. Then stillness. Ethan set the pages down gently. He did not argue. He did not nod. He simply looked at her. The afternoon light filtered through the glass behind her, casting long reflections across the polished floor, bending her silhouette into something almost untouchable. She was used to being the center of gravity in every room. Used to people adjusting their orbit around her without question. "You are asking for performance," he said finally, his tone even measured. "Not partnership." Scarlett did not blink. "I am asking for efficiency." A brief pause followed, then the faintest shift in his posture, almost unnoticeable, but enough to change the weight of the room. Then you should understand, Ethan replied, that efficiency does not come from control alone. The words landed softly, but they stayed. Scarlett leaned back slightly, studying him again, not with dismissal, but with calculation. You are not here to advise me, she said. You are here to play a role. Ethan's gaze did not move. Every role has limits. Another silence. Thicker this time. The kind that made even the air feel aware of itself. Scarlett stood, walking around the desk with slow, deliberate steps, her heels marking each second like a metronome. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to re-establish authority, far enough to maintain distance. Let me make this clear, she said, her voice lower now, quieter but sharper. In my world, people do not get to define the rules once the deal is signed. Ethan's expression did not change. No tension, no challenge, no need to prove anything. Just that same quiet steadiness. Then it is a good thing, he said, that we have not reached that moment yet. The statement hung there, subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable once felt. Scarlett held his gaze for a second longer than before, searching for something she could name, something she could control. But there was nothing obvious to hold on to. No arrogance, no defiance. Just presence. And presence was harder to break than resistance. A knock interrupted the moment. Her assistant stepped forward slightly. The press release is ready, she said. Scarlett did not look away from Ethan. Send it out. The assistant hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded and stepped back. Somewhere in the building, screens would light up, headlines would form, narratives would begin to shape themselves around a story that had not yet truly started. Scarlett finally turned away, walking back toward her desk, reclaiming the space with practiced ease. You will be picked up at 7 on Saturday, she said. Black tie event. High profile. Do not disappoint me. Ethan reached for the schedule again, folding it once with care, not like a burden, but like something already understood. I will not, he replied. Then he paused, just long enough to shift the weight of his next words. But you might want to prepare for something different. Scarlett glanced up, irritation flickering briefly before settling back into composure. Different is rarely useful. Ethan's hand rested lightly on the back of the chair beside him, his posture relaxed, grounded. Sometimes, he said quietly, it is the only thing that works. And for the second time since the deal had begun, Scarlett Vaughn found herself without an immediate answer. Saturday arrived without ceremony, just a slow shift in the city's rhythm as daylight softened and glass towers turned gold under the setting sun. The car waiting outside Ethan's building was impossible to miss, long black, polished to a mirror shine that reflected a version of the world he had never needed to belong to. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and nodded with quiet professionalism. Mr. Cole, he said. No surprise. No judgment. Just acknowledgement. Ethan adjusted the cuffs of his jacket, the fabric new but worn like it had always been his, and stepped inside without hesitation. The city moved past the tinted windows in blurred streaks of light and motion, storefronts closing, restaurants filling, people chasing moments that felt important in the dark. He did not check his reflection. He did not rehearse lines. He simply sat, still and grounded, as if the night ahead had already been accounted for. Across town, the event unfolded with precision. Valet lines stretched along the curb, cameras flashed in controlled bursts, and the entrance shimmered with curated elegance. Scarlett Vaughn stood just inside, her presence commanding without effort, her posture flawless, her expression carefully neutral. She did not fidget. She did not check the time. But when the car door opened and Ethan stepped out, something in her gaze sharpened. 3 quick whispers followed from nearby guests, low but distinct. That is him. He cleans up well. Let us see how long that lasts. Then the noise softened, replaced by the subtle hum of expectation. Ethan walked toward her, each step measured, unhurried, not as someone entering unfamiliar territory, but as someone choosing where to stand. The lights caught the clean lines of his suit, simple, understated, nothing excessive, yet nothing lacking. He stopped beside her, not behind, not ahead, exactly where he needed to be. Scarlett turned slightly, her voice low enough for only him to hear. You are on my left, she said. You speak only when addressed. You follow my lead. A brief pause. Then his answer just as quiet. We will see. The words were soft, but they carried weight. Scarlett did not respond immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, signaling their entrance, cameras shifting, attention locking in. Scarlett, a voice called, warm but edged with curiosity. A man approached, mid-50s, tailored suit, confidence built on decades of control. You did not mention you would be bringing someone. Scarlett's smile appeared instantly, polished, intentional. This is Ethan, she said. We have been seeing each other. The man's eyes flicked to Ethan, measuring, assessing, placing him into a category that made sense. What do you do? He asked. 3 quick beats filled the space. A glass set down. A breath held. A faint shift in posture from someone nearby. Then stillness. Scarlett opened her mouth, ready to answer for him, to maintain the narrative she had built. But Ethan spoke first. I solve problems, he said, his tone calm, neither defensive nor boastful. The man blinked just once, caught slightly off guard by the simplicity. That is vague, he replied. Ethan nodded faintly. Most real solutions are. A quiet ripple moved through the small circle, not laughter, not agreement, but something closer to attention. Scarlett felt it before she fully understood it, the subtle shift of control, the way the room adjusted its focus without permission. She placed a hand lightly at Ethan's arm, not out of affection but alignment, a reminder of structure, of rules. He did not pull away. He did not lean in. He simply allowed the contact, neutral, balanced. We should continue inside, she said smoothly, guiding the moment forward before it stretched too far. As they moved deeper into the event, the space grew louder, brighter, filled with conversations layered over one another like carefully arranged noise. But beneath it all, something else had begun. Not visible. Not announced. Just a quiet tension, like the air before a storm that had not yet decided when to arrive. Scarlett glanced at Ethan once, just briefly, expecting to see uncertainty, hesitation, something she could predict. Instead, she found none. Only that same steady presence, unchanged, unmoved, as if the rules she had written were already waiting to be rewritten. And for the first time that evening, Scarlett Vaughn felt something unfamiliar, not fear, not doubt, but the quiet awareness that she might not be the only one shaping what came next. The deeper they moved into the gala, the more the atmosphere shifted from performance to pressure, the kind that could not be rehearsed or controlled by scripts alone. Conversations layered over crystal glasses and soft music, laughter carried just a little too long, and beneath it all, deals were forming in glances and silences rather than words. Scarlett navigated the room with precision, greeting investors, acknowledging partners, every movement calculated, every smile placed exactly where it needed to be. Ethan remained beside her, not shadowing, not leading, simply present in a way that did not demand attention but quietly gathered it anyway. Stay close, Scarlett murmured under her breath as they approached a cluster of high-profile executives near the center of the room. This is where it matters. 3 voices overlapped again, hushed but sharp. That is Daniel Mercer. He controls the acquisition. If she loses him, the deal collapses. The name carried weight, the kind that reshaped entire industries with a single decision. Daniel Mercer stood with his back partially turned, his posture relaxed, but his attention razor-sharp, a man who listened more than he spoke and decided even less openly. Scarlett's steps slowed just slightly before she approached, her composure flawless. Daniel, she said, her tone warm but measured. I was hoping we would connect tonight. He turned, his expression unreadable for a fraction of a second before settling into polite recognition. Scarlett, he replied. His gaze shifted, not lingering but noticing Ethan with quiet intent. And this must be the man everyone is talking about. A faint ripple of attention moved through the group, subtle but immediate. Scarlett smiled, controlled, intentional. Ethan, she said. He has been a recent addition. A brief pause. Then Daniel's voice, calm, probing. Interesting timing. 3 quick movements followed. A glass lifted. A shoulder turned. A breath held just slightly longer than necessary. Then silence settled. Thin but expectant. Ethan met Daniel's gaze without hesitation, without challenge, simply steady. Timing is usually the only honest thing in a room like this, he said. The words were quiet, but they did not fade. Daniel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, curiosity replacing distance. "And what makes you say that?" he asked. Scarlett felt it then, the subtle shift, the conversation no longer anchored solely to her control. She stepped slightly forward, prepared to redirect, to bring structure back before it slipped too far. "What Ethan means is," she began. "What I mean," Ethan continued gently, not interrupting with force but with certainty, "is that most people here already know what they want before they ask for it." Another pause. This one deeper. The kind that did not invite laughter or dismissal, only attention. Daniel studied him now, not as an accessory, not as a placeholder, but as something worth evaluating. "And you?" Daniel asked. "Do you already know what you want?" The room seemed to lean in, the quiet growing heavier, conversations nearby fading into the background as if pulled away by something unseen. Scarlett's hand rested lightly against Ethan's arm again. A signal, a reminder, a boundary. He felt it. He did not move. "I know what matters," Ethan said. "And I know what does not last." The statement lingered, not dramatic, not forceful, but grounded in something that did not need to be explained. Daniel's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more recognition than approval. "That is rare," he said. Scarlett exhaled slowly, almost unnoticed, her composure still intact, but the control no longer absolute. She stepped in smoothly, reclaiming the flow. "Daniel, we should discuss the proposal tomorrow. Tonight is for lighter conversations." He nodded, but his attention remained partially on Ethan. "Tomorrow," he agreed. As the moment dissolved and the group shifted, Scarlett guided Ethan away, her steps calm but purposeful. The music swelled slightly, the room returning to its curated rhythm, but something had changed beneath it. She stopped near a quieter corner, her voice low, controlled. "You spoke out of turn," she said. Ethan looked at her, not defensive, not apologetic. "I answered a question." "You changed the tone," she replied. A brief silence followed. Then his response, steady as before. "So did he." Scarlett held his gaze, searching again for something she could define, something she could manage. But the more she looked, the less predictable it became. Around them the gala continued, lights shimmering, voices blending, but within that small space, the balance had shifted again. Not loudly, not completely, but enough to be felt. And for the first time that night, Scarlett Vaughn realized that the man standing beside her was not following her lead. He was choosing his own. The music softened as the night deepened, not quieter but more deliberate, like every note had been chosen to keep people lingering just a little longer than they intended. Conversations drifted into smaller circles, alliances forming and dissolving in low voices and careful smiles. Scarlett stood near the edge of the room now, a place where she could observe without being surrounded, her posture still flawless, her expression still composed, but her attention no longer divided across the crowd. It was fixed. On him. Ethan remained beside her, his presence unchanged, unaffected by the subtle currents of influence that moved through the space. He held a glass he had barely touched, his gaze moving occasionally, not searching, not calculating in the obvious ways but noticing. Always noticing. "You disrupted the rhythm," Scarlett said quietly, her voice controlled but no longer dismissive. "That was not part of the plan." 3 quick reactions echoed faintly from nearby, almost like the room itself responding. A quiet laugh from across the floor. A chair scraping lightly. A distant clink of glass. Then the moment narrowed again. Ethan turned slightly toward her, not fully, just enough to acknowledge her words. "Your plan assumed the room would behave," he said. "It never does." Scarlett's jaw tightened just slightly, a flicker of tension that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. "I do not assume," she replied. "I anticipate." A pause. Then his answer just as calm. "Then anticipate this." The words were not a challenge. They were a warning wrapped in patience. Scarlett studied him again, longer this time, searching past the surface, past the calm, trying to locate the mechanism behind it. People like him were supposed to reveal themselves under pressure. They were supposed to hesitate, to adapt, to show where they could be guided. But he did none of those things. Instead, he stood there as if pressure was something he had already lived through, something that no longer shaped him. Across the room, Daniel Mercer shifted his position, his attention still partially anchored to them despite conversations attempting to pull him elsewhere. Scarlett noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything that mattered. "He is watching you," she said, her tone lower now, more precise. That was not part of the strategy. Ethan followed her gaze briefly, then returned his attention to her. "It is now." The simplicity of the response unsettled her, more than any argument could have. Scarlett exhaled slowly, her composure recalibrating, her mind already moving through possibilities, adjusting variables, rebuilding control. "Tomorrow decides everything," she said. "If that meeting fails, none of this matters." 3 quick thoughts passed through the silence between them. The weight of the deal, the expectations behind it, the consequences of failure. Then stillness. Ethan set his glass down on a nearby table, the sound soft but intentional. "You are focused on the outcome," he said. Scarlett's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is the point." He shook his head once, barely. "No. That is the distraction." The words lingered, not loud, not forceful, but impossible to ignore once heard. Scarlett felt something shift again, deeper this time, not just in the room, but within the structure she had built around herself. "Explain," she said. Ethan looked at her fully now, his gaze steady, grounded, unshaken by the weight of her expectations. "You think tomorrow is about convincing him," he said. "It is not." A brief pause stretched, the kind that made time feel heavier than it was. "Then what is it about?" she asked. Ethan's voice lowered just slightly, not for secrecy but for clarity. "It is about whether he already trusts you." Silence followed. Not empty but full. Scarlett did not respond immediately. For the first time that night, she did not have a prepared answer, a calculated response, a controlled redirection. Around them the gala continued, unchanged on the surface, but the space between them had shifted again, deeper, more irreversible. And somewhere beyond the glass walls, the city lights flickered like distant signals, as if even the world outside was waiting to see who would truly control what came next. The night did not end with applause or celebration, only with a quiet unraveling of certainty that no one openly acknowledged. By the time the last guests began to leave, the air inside the gala felt thinner, as if something invisible had been taken from it. Scarlett stood near the exit, offering final words, controlled smiles, closing the evening with the same precision she had opened it. Yet her attention drifted, not to the investors, not to the cameras, but to the man standing just a few feet behind her, still composed, still unchanged, as if the entire night had only confirmed something he already knew. "Car is ready," her assistant whispered. Scarlett nodded but did not move immediately. 3 quiet sounds lingered in the background. Doors opening, footsteps fading, a distant engine starting, then stillness. She turned slightly toward Ethan. "You made an impression," she said, her tone neutral but no longer dismissive. Ethan adjusted his jacket sleeve once, a small motion, deliberate, grounded. "So did he," he replied. Scarlett's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Daniel does not impress easily." A brief pause, then his answer. "He is not supposed to." The words settled between them, simple but layered with something she could not ignore anymore. Outside, the night air carried a cooler edge, the city lights reflecting off the polished surface of the waiting car. They stepped in without ceremony, the door closing softly behind them, sealing the space into something quieter, more contained. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The car moved forward, smooth and steady, the city passing by in long streaks of light and shadow. Scarlett leaned back slightly, her posture still composed, but her thoughts no longer aligned in the clean lines she preferred. "You believe he does not trust me," she said finally. Ethan did not look at her right away. He watched the city through the window, the rhythm of movement, the constant flow that never waited for anyone. "I believe he is deciding if you trust yourself," he said. The response landed differently, not as analysis, not as critique, as something closer to truth. Scarlett exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly against her arm, a subtle shift that revealed more than she intended. "I built everything on control," she said, quieter now, not to him entirely, but not away from him either. "That is how you survive at this level." 3 quick beats filled the silence that followed. The hum of the engine, the soft turn of the wheels, the faint echo of a passing siren far in the distance. Then stillness returned. Ethan finally turned his gaze toward her. Control is not the same as clarity, he said. Scarlett met his eyes, holding the look longer than before, searching not for weakness, but for understanding. And what would you call clarity? She asked. A brief pause stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with something unspoken. Knowing when to stop proving something, he answered. The words did not rise. They did not push. They simply stayed. The car slowed as it approached her building, the tall structure rising above them like a reflection of everything she had built, everything she had defended, everything she believed defined her. The driver pulled to a stop. The door opened. But Scarlett did not step out immediately. She sat there for a moment longer, the city lights flickering across the glass, her reflection layered over them, no longer perfectly aligned. Tomorrow, she said, her voice steady again, but changed in a way she could not fully name. Ethan nodded once. Tomorrow, he repeated. She stepped out of the car, heels meeting pavement with quiet precision, her posture returning, her presence reclaiming the space around her. But as she walked toward the entrance, something remained behind, something she could not carry with the same certainty as before. Inside the car, Ethan remained seated for a second longer, his gaze steady, his expression unchanged. He had not taken control. He had not forced anything. And yet, the direction had already begun to shift. And somewhere between what was planned and what was real, the rules she had written were no longer the only ones that mattered. Morning arrived with a kind of clarity that did not feel gentle, the kind that stripped away illusion rather than easing into truth. The city outside Scarlett Vaughn's office moved with its usual precision, traffic flowing in steady lines, sunlight reflecting sharply against glass and steel, everything appearing controlled, predictable, exactly as it should be. Inside, the air felt different. Not chaotic, not unsettled, but altered in a way that could not be ignored once noticed. Scarlett stood at her desk, reviewing the final documents for the meeting, her posture exact, her expression composed, but her focus no longer as absolute as it once was. Numbers, projections, clauses, every detail aligned perfectly on paper, yet something about them felt incomplete, as if the outcome they promised depended on something that could not be written. A soft knock broke the stillness. "He is here," her assistant said. Scarlett did not respond immediately. 3 quiet beats passed. The faint hum of the building, the distant echo of a closing elevator door, the subtle shift of her own breath steadying. Then she spoke. "Send him in." The door opened and Ethan stepped inside, unchanged from the night before, calm, grounded, as if the weight of what was about to happen did not press against him the same way it did against everything else in the room. "We go in 10 minutes, Scarlett said, her voice controlled, returning to its familiar rhythm. "The structure is simple. I present. He responds. We negotiate terms." A brief pause. "You do not interrupt." Ethan glanced at the documents on her desk, then back at her. "You already know what he is going to say," he replied. Scarlett's eyes narrowed slightly. "I know what he should say." 3 quick movements followed. A page turned. Pen set down. A breath drawn in just slightly deeper than before. Then stillness. Ethan stepped closer, not into her space, but near enough to shift the dynamic without force. "That is the problem," he said quietly. The words landed without resistance, without argument, but they did not fade. Scarlett held his gaze longer this time, searching for hesitation, for uncertainty, for anything that would confirm she still understood the ground beneath her. "Then tell me," she said, her tone lower now, more direct. "What does he actually want?" A pause stretched, not empty but deliberate. Ethan's voice followed, steady as ever. "To see if you are still the same person he decided not to trust last year." The statement hit differently. Not as speculation, not as strategy, as memory. Scarlett's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, the smallest crack in a surface that had been reinforced for years. "You do not have that information," she said, but her voice no longer carried full certainty. Ethan did not move. "I do not need it," he replied. "He showed it last night." Silence followed. Not thin, not fragile, solid, the kind that forced truth to settle whether it was welcomed or not. Scarlett turned slightly away, her gaze drifting toward the window, the city stretching out beneath her like a system she had mastered, a structure she had built herself into. But for the first time it did not feel entirely within reach. If that is true, she said slowly, then the deal is already lost. 3 quick reactions moved through the moment. A distant phone ringing. The soft click of heels passing outside. The quiet shift of light as a cloud moved across the sun. Then stillness returned. Ethan's answer came without hesitation. "No," he said. Scarlett turned back toward him, her expression sharper now, searching for the edge she could still hold on to. "Then what changes?" she asked. Another pause. Then the shift. "You do," Ethan said. The words did not rise. They did not demand. They simply remained. Scarlett held his gaze longer than ever before, the silence stretching, deepening, reshaping the space between them. For a moment the room did not belong to control or strategy or expectation. It belonged to something quieter. Something real. A knock broke through. "It is time," her assistant said from the door. Scarlett did not move immediately. Then slowly she straightened, not into the same posture as before, but into something more deliberate, less rigid, more aware. She reached for the documents, then stopped, leaving them where they were. "We are not using those," she said. The assistant hesitated. "But the presentation is not the point," Scarlett replied, her voice calm but changed. She turned toward the door, then paused just long enough to glance at Ethan. Not for approval, not for instruction, but for alignment. He nodded once. That was enough. And as they stepped out together, the structure she had built did not collapse. It evolved. Quietly. Irreversibly. And somewhere ahead, in a room that had not yet gone silent, the rules were already waiting to be rewritten. The conference room was colder than the rest of the building, not in temperature but in expectation. Glass walls framed the city beyond, sunlight cutting sharp lines across the long table where decisions were meant to feel clean, measurable, final. Daniel Mercer stood near the far end, reviewing a thin folder, his posture relaxed, but his attention precise, like a man who had already seen every version of the outcome and was simply waiting to confirm which one would arrive. Scarlett entered first, her step steady, her presence controlled, but not rigid in the way it had been before. Ethan followed just half a pace behind, not leading, not trailing, exactly where he needed to be. 3 quick acknowledgments filled the room. A chair shifted. Pen clicked. A quiet greeting from an assistant. Then silence settled. Heavier than before, more intentional. "Scarlett," Daniel said, closing the folder without looking at it again. "I assume you brought something different today." A brief pause. Scarlett did not reach for her documents. She did not open a presentation. She simply met his gaze. "I brought clarity," she said. The words were simple, but they did not echo with performance. They stayed. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly, not in skepticism but in interest. "That would be a first," he replied. 3 quick reactions flickered across the room. A glance exchanged. A breath held. A subtle shift in posture from someone expecting tension. Then stillness. Scarlett stepped forward, not to dominate the space, but to stand within it fully. "Last year," she said, her voice steady, "you chose not to move forward with my proposal." Daniel did not interrupt. He simply watched. "You were right," she continued. The statement landed quietly, but it changed the room. Not dramatically, not visibly, but undeniably. A silence followed, deeper than anything before it, the kind that did not invite response, only attention. Daniel's expression shifted just slightly. "Explain," he said. Scarlett did not hesitate. "I was trying to control the outcome," she said, "instead of understanding what you actually needed." 3 quick beats passed. The faint hum of the air system. The soft tap of a finger against the table. The distant sound of a door closing somewhere down the hall. Then stillness returned. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her now, not as an opponent, not as a variable, but as something less predictable. "And what do I need?" he asked. A brief pause stretched, but this time it was not uncertainty. It was choice. Scarlett's answer came without force. "You need to know that I will not force a deal that does not work," she said. "Even if it costs me." The words did not rise. They did not push. They simply remained. Daniel's gaze held hers longer than before, measuring not the content, but the conviction behind it. "And if it does cost you?" he asked. Scarlett's expression did not change. "Then it was never the right deal." Silence followed. Not thin, not fragile, full. The kind that settled into every corner of the room, pressing against expectation until nothing unnecessary remained. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the assistants along the wall seemed to pause, as if the moment had asked them to. Daniel exhaled slowly, the smallest shift breaking the stillness. He looked down at the closed folder, then back at Scarlett. "That is not what I expected," he said. A faint pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, his attention moved to Ethan. Not as a question, as recognition. Ethan did not step forward. He did not speak. He simply stood there, calm, steady, as if the outcome had never depended on him taking control, only on him allowing the truth to surface. Daniel nodded once, more to himself than to them. "We will revise the terms," he said. 3 quiet reactions followed. A pen lifted. A note written. A breath released that no one admitted they were holding. Then the room returned slowly to motion. Scarlett did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply stood there, present, the weight of the moment settling into something quieter, something more lasting than victory. As the meeting continued, voices resumed, details emerged, but the shift had already happened. Not in the documents, not in the numbers, in the space between control and trust. And when it was over, when the room emptied and the glass walls reflected only the city again, Scarlett turned slightly toward Ethan. She did not thank him. She did not ask how. She simply looked at him, her gaze steady, no longer searching for advantage, only understanding. "You changed the rules," she said softly. Ethan shook his head once, almost unnoticeable. "No," he replied. "You did." The words settled into the quiet, not as a conclusion, but as something deeper. And for a moment, neither of them spoke, because the silence itself had already said everything that mattered. In this collection of touching stories, a powerful female CEO and a quiet single dad enter a calculated arrangement that slowly transforms into something deeper and more meaningful. What begins as control and image becomes a journey of dignity, trust, and emotional clarity. Through a series of touching stories, the single dad challenges expectations not with force but with calm intelligence, while the female CEO learns that true leadership is not about control but about understanding. These touching stories explore subtle power shifts, unspoken emotions, and the quiet strength that often goes unnoticed in a world driven by status. As tension builds across these touching stories, moments of silence reveal more than words ever could, leading to a powerful realization that reshapes both characters. Ultimately, these touching stories remind us that respect is not demanded but earned, and that sometimes the strongest influence comes from those who never raise their voice. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. Subscribe. There's more waiting to be told.